Did you know that one of the most powerful prophets in the Bible performed his final, earth-shaking miracle while on his deathbed? It's a story that has echoed through centuries, a warning and an encouragement wrapped in one dramatic scene. We're talking about Elisha, the prophet who called down fire, who split rivers with a cloak, who multiplied a widow's oil, and even raised a young boy from the dead. This was a man whose very presence was a sign of God's power. But now, the mighty prophet lay weak, his body fading. The room was quiet, almost unnaturally still. The man who once commanded kings and shook entire nations could barely lift his head. Imagine the scene: the great Elisha, now confined to his bed, the fire in his eyes dimmed, his voice a mere whisper. It's a humbling picture, isn't it? The end of an era. Suddenly, the door creaks open. In walks Joash, the king of Israel, but he doesn't enter with the usual royal swagger. He's trembling, his face etched with fear and grief. He rushes to Elisha's bedside, falls to his knees, and breaks down completely, crying out, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel." Now, this wasn't just a king mourning a dying friend or mentor. This was a desperate cry. The chariots and horsemen of Israel was a title of immense respect, a phrase once used for Elijah, meaning Elisha was the true defense, the spiritual army of the nation. King Joash wasn't just sad, he was terrified. With Elisha gone, who would protect them from their enemies, especially the menacing kingdom of Aram? He felt the spiritual shield of Israel being lowered, leaving them vulnerable and exposed. But here's where the story takes an unbelievable turn. Even on his deathbed, frail and gasping for breath, Elisha was still dangerous to the enemy. He was still a conduit of divine power. He heard the king's cry, and something stirred within him. With a voice that was barely audible, a faint whisper, he gave a command: "Get a bow and some arrows." Confused but obedient, King Joash scrambled to find them. He brought the bow and a quiver of arrows back to the bedside. What was Elisha planning? Was he hallucinating? No. Elisha then instructed the king to put his hands on the bow, ready to draw it, and then Elisha did something profound. He placed his own dying, wrinkled hands over the king's strong hands. Think about that for a moment. These were the same hands that had performed countless miracles, hands that had carried the fire of God. Now, frail and trembling, they were transferring one last impartation of prophetic power. It was a picture of one generation laying its blessing, its authority, upon the next. Elisha, even in his final moments, was still mentoring, still leading, still fighting for his people. "Open the east window," Elisha commanded, his voice gaining a flicker of its old strength. The king obeyed, opening the window that faced toward their enemy, Aram. The cold air must have rushed into the stuffy room. Elisha then gave the order, "Shoot." The king drew the bowstring, the wood groaning under the tension, and let the arrow fly. It soared out the window and disappeared into the distance. As the arrow flew, Elisha's voice rang out with a sudden, startling authority: "This is the Lord's arrow of victory. The arrow of victory over Aram, for you will completely defeat the Arameans at Aphek." That arrow wasn't just a piece of wood with a sharpened tip. It was prophecy in motion. It was a declaration of war from a deathbed. It was a physical representation of heaven's power being released on earth, a promise of a victory that was already secured in the spiritual realm. Imagine the hope that must have flooded King Joash's heart. The prophet was dying, but God was not. Victory was still possible. The first part of the miracle was complete. The promise was given. But then came the second part, the part that would determine the scope of that victory. This is where the story pivots from a powerful promise to a painful lesson. Elisha looked at the king and gave him a new command. "Take the arrows." Joash picked up the remaining arrows from the quiver. "Now," Elisha said, "strike the ground." This was an unusual instruction, a symbolic act. The king was supposed to strike the ground with the bundle of arrows, symbolizing the repeated striking of his enemies. So, King Joash took the arrows and struck the ground, once, twice, 3 times. And then, he stopped. He probably thought he had done enough. 3 is a good number, a complete number in many contexts. Maybe he felt a little foolish, hitting the floor with a bunch of arrows. Maybe his enthusiasm waned. Whatever his reason, he stopped after the 3rd strike. Silence filled the room, a heavy, expectant silence. And then, the dying prophet did something shocking. He who was too weak to sit up moments before now rose with a surge of divine energy. His eyes weren't dim anymore, they blazed with holy anger and disappointment. He looked at King Joash, and his voice thundered in the small room. "You should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times. Then you would have completely destroyed Aram, but now you will defeat them only 3 times. Can you feel the weight of those words? A destiny was reduced in that moment. A complete, total, nation-freeing victory was on the table, and it was downsized to a partial one. And why? It wasn't because of some great sin. It wasn't because of outright rebellion or idolatry. It was because of half-hearted obedience. It was because of a lack of persistence. The miracle didn't fail, the king's follow-through did. He had the promise, he had the power of the prophet's declaration behind him, but when it was his turn to act, he stopped short. He did what was asked, but he didn't do it with the passionate, relentless persistence that the moment required. He got a victory, yes. The Bible records that he did defeat Aram 3 times, just as Elisha prophesied. He never lost his throne, but he lost the full measure of what God intended for him and for his nation. He settled for good when complete was within his grasp. And this is the powerful, timeless warning for every single one of us today. How many times have we been in King Joash's shoes? We receive a promise from God. We feel a stirring in our spirit. We start to pray. We start to believe. We start to step out in faith. We strike the ground once, maybe twice. We see a little bit of movement, a little bit of progress. And then, we stop. We stop just before the major breakthrough. We get discouraged. We get tired. We start to doubt. We think, well, I've done my part. We obey, but not completely. We persist, but not to the end. Elisha's final miracle wasn't just about shooting an arrow out of a window. The real miracle was the revelation it contains. Heaven moves until you stop moving. God's power is flowing. His promises are active, but He often partners with our persistence. Your full healing might be on the 5th prayer, but what if you quit after 4? Your business breakthrough might be on the 6th attempt, but what if you give up after 5? Your restored relationship might be just one more act of forgiveness away, but what if you decide you've done enough? The Apostle Paul tells us in Galatians, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." The book of Hebrews says we need to persevere so that when we have done the will of God, we will receive what He has promised. It's all about that endurance, that refusal to quit too soon. King Joash had a quiver full of arrows. He could have kept striking. He had an open-ended command. The limitation wasn't in the prophet's power or in God's ability. The limitation was in his own heart. He limited his own victory. So let me ask you today, where in your life have you stopped striking the ground? What promise from God have you let go of? What dream have you abandoned because it got too hard? Elisha's story is a call to pick up your arrows again. It's a call to keep praying, keep believing, keep obeying, keep striking the ground with passionate faith. Don't settle for 3 victories when God is offering you complete destruction of the thing that stands against you. Your greatest breakthrough might be 1 strike away. Don't stop now. Thanks so much for watching. If this message resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more content that dives deep into the powerful truths of the Bible. See you in the next video.